Tonight, celebrating Pope Francis, the trailblazing religious leader of 1.3 billion Catholics who transformed the face of the church.
Somos todos hijos de Dios.
We are all children of God, he said, and God loves us as we are.
Injecting fresh optimism to the faith by modernizing the papacy, expressing compassion for the LGBTQ community, becoming the Pope of many firsts. The first Pope on Instagram, the first Jesuit, the first from the Americas. Passing away just hours after the holiest day on the Christian calendar.
He knew how much people were counting on seeing him.
Plus, what happens next? Inside the centuries-old process to choose a successor to the papacy.
This is the most important thing that they do.
Shrouded in mystery, dramatized on screen in the Oscar-winning film Conclave.
We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
And 1.25 billion souls watching.
Who's on the short list to become the Vatican's next pope? This special edition of Nightline, celebrating Pope Francis. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, the world mourning the death of Pope Francis, the humble leader to 1.3 billion Catholics in a changing world. Seen as a beacon of kindness, warmth, and inclusivity during his papacy. Joining me now is ABC's chief international correspondent, James Longman. James, so many mourners have noted how serene he appeared on Easter Sunday, only to pass hours later at such a holy moment. Some saying it's quite fitting.
Yeah, Juju, I think the symbolism of this isn't lost on people. The holiest time of year, the sense perhaps that Pope Francis just held on through Easter for that reason, to be here for the faithful. He spent his last day putting the faithful first, and that has not been lost on people at all. Look, this was someone who just liked to work apart from anything else. His doctors had a hard time convincing him to rest. We know that. He was in the hospital with this lung condition for weeks and weeks, and oftentimes he did just want to get up out of bed, make phone calls, get to work. And once more we saw the last day of his life he was working, and that is how Pope Francis will be remembered, Juju.
And true to form, you've been in Rome throughout the evening. Pope Francis, of course, will be remembered for his life of service and humility. And we know in his final wishes, he made changes to his own funeral processional to reflect his modesty and his deep humility.
Yeah, that's right. So only 7 popes have been buried in this particular chapel outside of the Vatican where he's chosen to be buried, St. Mary Major. Now, the last pope buried there was in the 1600s, so this is a long, long time ago. And that reflects once more his rejection of, I suppose, the trappings, the finery of the Vatican. When he came in, he made a great show of the humility, of following in the footsteps of the humility of Jesus and not wanting to have these worldly things. So yes, he will have his burial outside of the Vatican. We're not clear on what the logistics of that will be, if there'll be a procession there, if there'll be a service at that church. And he has said that he wants to be buried in a very simple tomb, none of the finery that one would imagine with the Vatican. So dying very much as he lived.
The Pope will be remembered. His legacy will be remembered for his humility. James Longman, thank you.
Thanks, Gigi.
Pope Francis broke barriers himself and tried to break barriers for others. He defied high-end traditions, instead prioritizing the poor, the sick. In his final Easter address on Sunday, he said how much contempt is stirred up at times towards the vulnerable, the marginalized, and the migrants. The impact of Francis's tone and tenure will be felt for generations. Tonight, the world paying tribute to Pope Francis. Masses of faithful followers paying respects in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, praying the Rosary. In the City of Light, darkness, the Eiffel Tower black in honor of his legacy. At Notre Dame Cathedral, mourners lining up for a mass honoring the late Pope. His home country, Argentina, announcing a full week of mourning.
Tenemos la certeza de que más allá del dolor que hoy tengamos en el corazón, del corazón Francisco no se va más.
The 88-year-old greeted thousands of faithful lining the streets around the Vatican just a day ago for Easter Sunday Mass, looking frail but delighting the crowds. He appeared at the balcony in a wheelchair, raising his arms towards the audience, the crowd jubilant when he emerged.
cari fratelli.
His voice nearly a whisper as he delivered his remarks before the Master of Ceremonies delivered the rest of his message, calling for peace around the world.
He knew how much people were counting on seeing him as part of their happiness with the Easter holidays. I was shocked to see him do anything publicly, considering how sick he was.
The pontiff was hospitalized recently for pneumonia, the Vatican later revealing that his condition had worsened and that he was being treated for bilateral pneumonia. The Vatican press office releasing the death certificate, saying Pope Francis died from cerebral stroke, coma, and irreversible cardiocirculatory collapse. During the White House Easter egg roll, President Trump ordering flags to fly at half-staff in honor of the 266th Pope.
He was a good man, worked hard. He loved the world, and it's an honor to do that.
Vice President J.D. Vance was one of the last world leaders to meet with the Pope. This morning, Vance posting on X, "I was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill," adding, "May God rest his soul." Pope Francis died just hours after marking one of the holiest days in the Christian calendar.
The timing of his death was really beautiful. He, in a sense, celebrated Easter with the faithful on Easter Sunday, and now he celebrates Easter on Easter Monday with God in heaven.
When Francis emerged onto the balcony at St. Peter's Basilica in 2013, the new leader of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics,
Buonasera.
Few expected a pope who would so radically transform the face of the papacy, with his lifelong lessons of humility injecting a new wave of optimism into the Catholic Church.
To the world, it seems that whenever a pope talks about certain issues, they want to label him a progressive or a conservative. To Catholics, he was just consistently Catholic through and through.
Jorge Mario Bergoglio made history as the first pope from Latin America and the first Jesuit. He grew up in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the son of an Italian immigrant, an avid soccer fan who loved dancing the tango. An infection in his early 20s required the removal of part of his lung, which left him vulnerable to respiratory illnesses. After studying chemistry, he went to the seminary, becoming a priest when he was 32.
In many ways, he was typical of a Latin American clergy, a desire for clergy not to ally themselves with the rich and powerful in society, an emphasis on environmentalism, simplicity in church life, in church services.
As a cardinal in Argentina, he sold off the church mansion, cooked his own meals, and rode the subway while helping the poor.
He was a very down-to-earth person and would often end conversations by just saying, "Pray for me," like everybody else would.
As Pope, he would take his name from St. Francis of Assisi, who dedicated his life to caring for the poor. He was the first pope who refused to wear certain traditional papal vestments, instead choosing simple white robes and black loafers. He was the first pope not to live in the lavish papal apartment. Instead, he chose a modest apartment. One of his favorite expressions, todos, todos, todos.
Everyone, everyone, everyone. And it basically means a church for everyone. And it was a way of really reminding people that he wanted a church that was welcoming and listening and inclusive.
Antes de crear el mundo,
Before creating the world,
Dios amaba.
God loved.
Porque Dios es amor.
Because God is love.
For Holy Thursday, the Pope often performed the annual ritual of washing and kissing feet with people on the margins of society, such as prisoners, refugees, and the homeless. And this Pope was determined to reach out, often riding in an open-air Pope-mobile, wading into the crowds, greeting children, blessing the disabled, and posing for selfies. This seismic shift in tone, however, brought very little change in doctrine. Francis called for a larger role for women in the church. At the same time, he reaffirmed church opposition to female priests. He took steps to express compassion for the LGBTQ community while holding fast to the church's strict teachings. But in a stunning declaration, Pope Francis said that laws criminalizing homosexuality are, quote, unjust.
Somos todos hijos de Dios.
We are all children of God, he said, and God loves us as we are, and for the strength that each one of us has to fight for our dignity.
I think he was responding in particular to the sense in that group that they were not welcome in the church. And of course, it was his hallmark to make people who felt unwelcome very, very welcome.
At the Vatican, he met privately with victims of sex abuse by the clergy.
The fact that he met with victims of sex abuse, so the crimes of sex abuse, I think was really welcomed by almost everybody, and I was grateful that he did it.
But he angered many Jews and Israelis on his 2014 trip to the Holy Land by adding a visit to Israel's barrier wall, a gesture of solidarity with Palestinians. Often referred to as the People's Pope, he embraced new ways of connecting with people, often making history while doing so. In 2015, he became the first pope to address the U.S. Congress.
I am most grateful for your invitation to address this joint session of Congress in the land of the free at the home of the brave.
The following year, he became the first pope to join Instagram with a simple request, writing, "Pray for me." And he delivered this special message ahead of Super Bowl 2017, shared by the Catholic News Agency.
Los grandes eventos deportivos como el Super Bowl de hoy son sumamente simbólicos, lo que demuestra que es posible construir una cultura del encuentro.
Francis will be remembered most for his disarming humility and humor, his warmth with children, his compassion for the poor and the sick.
I would ask each to care one another, be close to one another, respect one another. I bless each one of you from my heart.
And when we return, who will succeed Pope Francis? Inside the deeply mysterious traditions of the Conclave, the secretive process of choosing the Vatican's next leader. This special edition of Nightline, celebrating Pope Francis. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In the days to come, thanks to Pope Francis, the largest and most diverse gathering of cardinals will meet at the Vatican and follow a time-honored process to choose his successor, one of intrigue, mystery, and the stuff movies are made of.
It's the centuries-old process, shrouded in mystery. Over 100 cardinals from around the world descending on the Vatican to elect the next pope.
The Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
The secretive process dramatized in this year's Oscar-winning film, Conclave.
We're about to choose the most famous man in the world.
And 1.25 billion souls watching.
A political thriller fictionalizing what happens behind closed doors when a pope dies. Like the film, the tradition has taken place in Michelangelo's iconic Sistine Chapel for the last 500 years, beginning with a public oath of secrecy.
Extra omnes.
Everybody is then ushered out, priests, cameras, and reporters. Anyone who's not a cardinal elector must leave, and the great doors are closed.
There are some incredible historical stories about conclaves that have gone on for years. That is not normal practice, though. Ordinarily, especially in the modern era, conclaves usually take under a week. The last few have just been a matter of days.
During the election process, cardinals are totally cut off from the outside world. They will sleep and eat in the Santa Marta guest house, located a few minutes from the Sistine Chapel, inside the Vatican walls. Each cardinal will have a private room and bathroom.
They're really cut off from all communication. They're not allowed to have their cell phones. They have to turn that in at the beginning of the conclave, and it's stored in the Casa Santa Marta. The cardinals are under pain of excommunication if they ever release information about their votes, about the ballot counts.
Aside from the cardinals, about 70 other people are allowed in Santa Marta House to assist them. People like doctors, cooks, and housekeepers, each required to take a solemn oath of absolute and perpetual secrecy. Only cardinals under the age of 80 can vote for a pope.
It's to prevent a gerontocracy. They want a little more younger thinking, and in the church, under 80 constitutes younger.
Each cardinal receives a ballot with the phrase, "I choose as Pope blank," written in Latin with a blank line for them to write in their candidate. Votes are cast throughout the day, twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon, though that can vary. In order of seniority, cardinals take their ballot up to the front of the chapel and place them in an urn. The ballots are then mixed up to ensure anonymity, taken out one by one and read aloud so that each cardinal can keep his own tally. A 2/3 majority is needed for a pope to be elected. The ballots are then thrown into the top part of this stove and burned, as all eyes turn to the chimney of the Sistine Chapel for the results, revealed in the color of a plume of smoke. Black smoke indicating the vote was inconclusive. White smoke signals a new pope. Chemical pellets have been added to the bottom of the stove to make sure the smoke is the correct color.
It's an electric atmosphere when that white smoke goes up, and I think everyone is very relieved. Of course, that's only the beginning, because after that you have to wait even more for the name to be announced and then even longer for the actual pope to come out.
The Pope-elect is then asked by the Dean of Cardinals if he will accept the nomination and for the name he wishes to be called. The new pope's white papal garments already await his election, hanging in the Room of Tears, as it's known, where he will come to get changed, pray, and perhaps, as tradition implies, to weep. Then, on the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square, the Deacon of Cardinals announces, in Latin, "We have a pope."
Habemus Papam.
The Pope will then step out onto the balcony to finally reveal himself as the new leader of the more than 1 billion Catholics across the world. 12 years after Pope Francis first stepped onto that balcony, the People's Pope, as he is known, remaining true to himself to the end, choosing to be buried outside the Vatican.
He wants to be buried in St. Mary Major, home to the icon Mary's Salvation of the Roman People, which Pope Francis has prayed before many, many times. And now when they go to pray in the chapel just next to it will be Pope Francis's body, and they'll be able to visit him so much more easily.
And when we come back, Pope Francis in his own words. We'll have much more on the life and legacy of Pope Francis in the coming days and weeks. Tomorrow night, a primetime special, Francis, the People's Pope, airs at 10 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC. For now, we leave you with the Holy Father in his own words from the ABC News Town Hall in 2015, speaking about his hope for all of us and the future.
The world has to have a greater consciousness of the fact that exploitation of one another is not the path. We are all created for friendship in society. All of us bear responsibility for everyone else. No one can say, this is as far as my responsibility goes. We are all responsible for everyone, to help each other out as best we can. Friendship in society. That's what God created us for. I pray for you all, for all the people of the United States, and I ask you please to pray for me. Thank you.